I've spoken up and saved my soul. Will I save my life? During the wars, violence against journalists and media was brutal and widespread. The intent was to conceal the truth about these wars from the public. Journalists were murdered for doing their jobs. In the aftermath, there was neither willingness among media professionals nor a favorable social climate to confront those warmongering colleagues in media who were inciting hatred and obscuring the truth. And now, whenever wartime journalistic crimes from the recent past come back to haunt those media and those colleagues who have been feigning uncompromising professionalism ever since, the skeletons are falling out of their cupboards. Upon these shaky foundations, the media systems have been built in the post-war years. On the other hand, the old habit of seeing the independent media and truly professional investigative journalism as enemies has persisted to date. Unfortunately, in the post-war period, this attitude towards the media has been a legacy shared by former Yugoslav republics. Here are some examples to illustrate the point. Murders of journalists, the unsolved cases of Dada Vujasinović, of Slavko Ćuruvija and Milan Patrić in Serbia, of Ivo Pukanić and Niko Franić in Croatia, of Duško Jovanović in Montenegro, of Batil Ajeti in Kosovo. An assassination attempt on Željko Kopanj in Bosnia-Herzegovina. He lost both his legs in the attack and is now running a Banja Luka-based independent Nezavisne novine daily. A failed bombing attempt on the lives of Serbian journalist Dejan Anastasijević and his family. Physical and verbal violence against journalists. Beatings and threats. Dušan Miljuš in Croatia. Željko Ivanović and Mladen Stojović in Montenegro. Goran Gavrilov and Teofil Pančić in Serbia. Journalists are placed under plainclothes police protection. Brankica Stanković, Vladimir Mitrić, Veran Matić in Serbia, Duško Miljuš and Berislav Jelinić in Croatia. Media companies are intimidated by ways of frequent mob and arson threats, and frequent threatening gatherings in front of media headquarters building of B92 in Serbia. Libel cases and exorbitant fines and damages imposed on journalists and media, which may lead to financial distress and threaten with bankruptcy, as was the case of the Belgrade-based daily Danas here in Serbia. Insidious and sometimes blatant attempts to block media operation by levying outrageous taxes and jeopardizing their survival, as was the case of TVA1 in Macedonia. The investigative journalism is most often the reason for vicious attacks on journalists, which in turn necessitates 24-hour-a-day police protection. This, effectively, turns journalists into captives. However, all the colleagues that I know of are still doing their jobs despite considerable constraints imposed on their freedom of movement and communication. At B92, which is where I come from, my colleague Brankica Stanković and I myself are currently living under 24 hours police protection regime. The B92 building has been under police protection for years by now. And yet, we have managed to expand our investigative teams, set up a school of investigative journalism, and incorporate investigative journalism stories in our regular daily B92 news broadcasts and programming, in addition to special investigative journalism shows. Our colleague from Zagreb, Croatia, Duško Miljuš, is now in a similar situation and also under police protection after a brutal beating. Against all the odds, we continue to do our work and investigate the background to these threats. It is, however, extraordinary that some media professionals in the Western Balkans have come to see the threats and resulting violence against journalists daring to investigate the taboo stories to which no one else would even come close as something normal. Investigative journalism has remained a bright spot in our profession, despite sustained onslaught of fast, short, superficial and sensationalist stories. Many do not like it, particularly powerful political figures and tycoons who have amassed their wealth illegally and endeavor now to use it against those who are intent on exposing their shady dealings, their illicit monopolies, and attempts to effectively rule whole countries by themselves. Too often, media owners also dislike this form of journalism because, in their view, it only gives them headaches. However, investigative journalism plays a role of paramount importance in our societies. In Serbia, indictments have been brought and criminal proceedings launched following B92 investigative stories. At times, though, nothing has come to pass due to the weakness of the system, but we have at least spoken up. We have warned the public at large, provided records and presented well-substantiated claims in our investigative shows. Economic pressures exerted on the media are another tool used to force the broadcasters and print media to toe the line, particularly in the times of economic crisis. Big companies owned by all-powerful tycoons deny advertising contracts, directly and through media buying agencies. Pressure is also exerted through selective advertising by state institutions and agencies, which favor certain media outlets over others, because they never stir up public opinion by exposing abuses and corrupt practices. High fines coupled with damages wiped out one of the best weeklies in Europe, Croatia's own Feral Tribune. Frequent and restrictive changes to media legislation, often subsequently found to be unconstitutional, inflict a lot of damage to the media and force journalists to resort to self-censoring. Lack of an open public debate on the free flow of information and the position of media and journalists has stalled the process of adopting proper media development strategy and modern media legislation. Both would ensure that journalism perform its vital function in society. This should be a crucial requirement for all the countries in the process of European integration prior to their admission to the EU. The economic crisis has strongly affected the media and journalists in Southeastern Europe. Newsrooms were the first to be hard hit by downsizing and by investigative journalism budget cuts. Everyone and everything is moving over to PR sector, not only metaphorically and content-wise, but also in reality. Therefore, I believe it is necessary to set up special funds at the European level, funds aiming to help preserve and further develop investigative journalism. Therefore, the funds should help the media make the transition to a new age, the transition required by new technologies, social networking, and new economic realities. The Insider, B92's most influential investigative show, would not happen without the assistance provided by a variety of organizations committed to professional journalism, fight against corruption and other ills of our societies. Foreign media owners in Serbia should therefore show solidarity and responsibility regarding the society in which their media operate. If we want peace, stability and democracy in this part of Europe, it is then necessary to provide tools and mechanisms for the support and development of investigative journalism. Investigative journalism which would not be at the mercy of either governments or tycoons. Just like the industry, which has to follow EU environmental regulations, the media should observe European standards of professional, accountable and unbiased reporting and freedom of expression. Otherwise, we might see Europe flooded once again by 2 million refugees.